では捜査本部が置かれております須磨警察署前から橋本記者がお伝えします。
100人から200人がいるということで、非常にパニック状態になっています。
つながりませんか。もう一度繰り返します。先ほどからお伝えしておりますように、
神戸からの中継なんですが、須磨警察署だいぶ混乱しているようです。
Hey friends, it's 𝐘𝐸𝐬 dearest. I know, it's been God knows how long since the last episode of this series. I took a break from the series because of some complications from the last videos. It's a long story, I'm not gonna get into it. But don't worry, this series is very much still alive on this channel. If you're new to the series, I basically take some of Japan's most infamous and brutal true crime cases and bring them out on camera in detail. So to start off, I'm gonna take you guys back to November 8th, 1969, when policemen of California received a cryptic letter containing 340 symbols that would later be deciphered by a private team 51 years later in 2020. I'm gonna read the letter. There are some grammatical errors that make this a bit confusing. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death. Signed with a crosshair-like symbol, these were the words of an infamous killer said to have taken the lives of 37 people and was never found. And to this day, of what remains as the most famous unsolved case in American history, the Zodiac Killer. Wait, what, 𝐘𝐸𝐬? You're talking about the Zodiac Killer? That's not even Japan, and that's old news. Everybody knows that story. Yeah, I know, but I have to mention the Zodiac Killer because it's important to keep in mind when we talk about cases that essentially evolved from that. Since the Zodiac Killer, there's been pop-ups of similar serial killers that many would argue were delusional and inspired copycats. The Zodiac Killer was infamous not only in the English-speaking world, but other different cultures and countries as well, such as Japan. And Japan has its own filing cabinet of twisted cases, and this series of On the Case has only covered a very small percentage of that. Today we look at one of Japan's most youngest serial killers in history. And no, I'm not talking about Nevada-tan. There's a lot of videos covering that in detail. I'm talking about another serial killer, one that shocked the nation in the late 90s, when the head of an 11-year-old boy named Jun Hase was found impaled on the front gates of a school before the students arrived. The culprit is most famously known today by two names, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 Sakakibara and Boy A. I'm Detective 𝐘𝐸𝐬, and this is On the Case. Today, many sources claim that the killer's real name goes by Shinichiro Azuma. Today he's known widely by two names, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 Sakakibara and Boy A. Because of the way the story goes, I'll be interchanging between these names throughout the video, but just keep in mind, these are the same person. 𝐘𝐨𝐬 was a 14-year-old boy who committed crimes that spread throughout Japanese media and is still despised for not only his crimes, but for being let go by the government to roam as a free man. A man that is still alive to this day. Today we will follow the life of 𝐘𝐨𝐬 and his upbringing. I'm gonna let you guys know that some of the information in this video is taken by a book that he published in 2005. Here's the book. It details his personal regrets and memories regarding the entire case. I know what you're thinking, who the hell would even try to publish a book made by a serial killer? Yeah, the public thought that too, and they immediately took it off the shelves. But not before selling over 100,000 copies and then rising up to Japan's bestseller lists, so thanks humanity. As much as I wanted to accomplish my research using this book, Buying it, which meant giving royalties to the serial killer, kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. So luckily, I was able to find it deep on the web online and get it translated, so I don't have to have the guilty conscience of giving my money to the serial killer. Anyways, so let's begin by diving into the childhood of Sato Sakakibara. Born on July 7th, 1982, Sato was born into a very traditional Japanese family who followed some pretty strict customs. Some friends that attended elementary school with him claimed that he was bright and popular, but as he entered junior high school, he became more shut in and introverted due to the pressures of academic success. Not much of his mother and father is documented, but his later confessions made it very obvious that he had a strong connection with his grandmother. I have only one picture of my childhood. I disposed of all the other photos, but I couldn't let go of this one. My grandmother in a black kimono sits on a massage chair. She places her left hand firmly on my chest and gently places my right hand to my right thigh so that I don't slip off her knee. Sato recalled a time where he tried climbing a tree to impress her, and the higher he went, his grandmother shouted for him to come down, worried for his well-being. My grandmother began to touch everywhere on her face. I thought I had done something wrong, so I climbed down the tree and rushed to my grandmother. My grandmother hugged me while crying. I felt so loved. No matter what I do or not do, my grandmother loves me. In 5th grade, Sato's grandmother passed away. After her funeral, Sato went into her old bedroom and found her favorite electric massager. In front of the mortuary tablet, Sato took the electric massager off of it and started to pleasure himself with it while looking at the photo of his grandmother. I desperately chased the illusion of my grandmother, her voice, her smell, her touch. Tears, runny nose, and drool were then mixed. I felt that what I did was a ridiculously filthy act. In front of my grandmother's mortuary tablet, while staring at her deceased, I experienced it with one of her favorite relics while thinking of her. This continued on for a couple more years. It's confirmed by psychologists and Sato himself that the death of his grandmother is what began his fascination with death. At age 12, he began mutilating animals to better understand death. He began by collecting slugs and was curious about how they would look dismembered. So while he continued with his practices in his grandmother's room, he was also dissecting slugs off to the side. In one instance, he lined up a row of frogs in the street and rode over them with his bike. Soon he chased his target to bigger animals and started by mutilating cats and decapitating pigeons, which made him even more sexually aroused. Foreshadowing his events to come, by age 13, Sato had abused and killed several different animals. He even admitted to his teacher that his hobby was to kill insects. He then started carrying weapons to school and regularly wrote in his diary. Some of his entries would say, "I can ease my irritation when I'm holding a survival knife, or spinning scissors like a pistol." While his classmates were thinking of how to date, he was thinking of how to kill people. His fascination with killers began with cases like Ted Bundy and the Zodiac Killer. He dreamed of being feared by people just like his idols. Eventually, Sato became tired of mutilating animals and decided to graduate on to humans. On February 10th, 1997, Sato bludgeoned 2 unnamed girls with a hammer, both of which had survived. Because the case was considered private at the time, I couldn't find any other information regarding this event. But a month later, on March 16th, Sato met a young girl in 4th grade named Ayaka. He approached Ayaka and asked her where he would be able to wash his hands. After guiding him to a nearby elementary school, he said, "I want to thank you, so please turn to me." When Ayaka looked back, he beat her with a mallet. Immediately after that, another 3rd grade girl who was nearby was stabbed with a knife. Sato biked home and then wrote in his notebook detailing the incident. He began writing a letter to his so-called god that he named 𝐉𝐚𝐩𝐸. I've looked everywhere for what this name even means, and it still remains unclear. To my beloved 𝐉𝐚𝐩𝐸, today we conducted a holy experiment to confirm the fragility of human beings. I decided to keep this diary as a memorial. I brought the hammer down. When the girl turned to face me, I think I hit her a few times, but I was too excited to remember. I thank you, 𝐓𝐚𝐩𝐥𝐥𝐞𝐫 for this. Please continue to protect me. Both girls went to the hospital. The young girl who was stabbed was discharged 2 weeks later, but 𝐘𝐨𝐬𝐥𝐥𝐞𝐬 died in a matter of days after the incident. In 2010, the family of 𝐘𝐨𝐬𝐥𝐥𝐞𝐬 then published a book called To 𝐘𝐈𝐬𝐥, Thank You for the Power to Live. And in March of this year, 𝐘𝐈𝐬𝐥's father made a statement to reporters on his thoughts and state of his well-being 25 years after the incident. He wrote a letter quoting, 25 years after our beloved 𝐘𝐈𝐬𝐥 passed away at the age of 10, her existence has not diminished even if twice as long as 𝐘𝐈𝐬𝐥 lived, and she is firmly rooted in our hearts. May 24th, 1997, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 gets on his bike and leaves home in the early afternoon to find his next victim. After riding around the town for 10 minutes, he found a boy walking alone. It was a special ed student, an 11-year-old boy named Jun Hase. He found Jun wandering and told him he found a turtle nearby. 𝐘𝐨𝐬 lured Jun up a hill that he calls the Chocolate Stairs. They walked until they reached a TV antenna station at the top of Tank Mountain. As soon as they got close to the more forested area, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 strangled Jun to death, supposedly using a shoelace. He then hid the body in the facility for some time, using the peaceful neighborhood of Kobe as a fortress for his crimes. Boy A returned to the scene with a handsaw and decapitated Jun's head along with other parts of the body. He stabbed the boy's eyes with a knife and tore the eyelids. In addition, he tried to cut the tongue to keep as a souvenir, but couldn't cut through due to rigor mortis. He also drank some of the boy's blood in a plastic bag, and his reasoning? My blood is dirty, so I thought that drinking a pure child's blood would cleanse the dirty blood. Following soon after, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 played with the head before ejaculating on it. From there, he cleaned the head and began to disfigure it. 𝐘𝐨𝐬 left the torso under the floor of Tank Mountain, but took the head with him. Over 150 police officers began patrolling the neighborhood daily. On May 27, 1997, Boy A arrived at his junior high school around 3 a.m. He takes the head of Jun Hase and places it at the front of the gate. 5 hours before students are expected to arrive at school, a janitor arrived at the gate, and upon discovering the head was also a note stuffed in the mouth written in red ink. This is the beginning of the game. I am putting my life at stake for the sake of this game. If I'm caught, I'll probably be hanged. Police should be angrier and more tenacious in pursuing me. It's only when I kill that I am liberated from the constant hatred that I suffer and that I am able to attain peace. It is only when I give pain to people that I can ease my own pain. You police guys, stop me if you can. I desperately want to see people die. It is a thrill for me to commit murder. A bloody judgment is needed for my years of great bitterness. Signed, 𝐘𝐨𝐬 Sakakibara. This was the first time he referred to himself as 𝐘𝐨𝐬 Sakakibara. The kanji that's used in the name made him think that it would make him sound more frightening. Police commented that the style of the killing plus the note was very reminiscent of the Zodiac killer. On June 6, Boy A sent another letter to the newspaper, this time much more detailed, also written in red ink. He claimed responsibility for the murder as well as threatening that more killings would follow. His letter also went to explain about the Japanese educational system, calling it compulsory education, which made me an invisible person. The Japanese media reported cases and referred to him as Onibara, or Demon's Rose. Angered by the press getting his name wrong, he wrote a letter. From now on, if you misread my name or spoil my mood, I will kill 3 vegetables a week. If you think I can only kill children, you are greatly mistaken. He originally denied committing the crime, but after the police showed him the letter written in red ink stating, "It is clear that this was written by you," he burst into tears and confessed.
あの車です。あの車です。あの車に。
神戸市須磨区の小学6年生長谷淳君が殺害された事件で、兵庫県警捜査本部は今夜7時過ぎ、遺体の頭部が見つかった中学校に通う14歳の少年を殺人などの疑いで逮捕しました。
100人から200人がいるということで、非常にパニック状態になっています。
こちら淳君の自宅前です。今捜査員が中に入り、両親に説明をしているところです。
At 7:05 p.m., He was arrested on suspicion of murder and abandonment of a body. Boy A also confessed to the murder of Ayaka Yamashita. Police discovered his diary entries as well as books on Hitler and serial killers. He was brought in for interrogation and confession for the murders of his victims. Do you know about Jun's case? I saw it on TV. I'm tired. Is there any physical evidence? The detective was sharp. The detective yelled, put his hands on the desk, and stood up vigorously, picked up the thick file on the edge and slammed it in front of my eyes. He opens the file and takes out the page and squeezes it while showing me. All the essays you wrote at school. We asked an expert to do a handwriting analysis with the letters sent to Kobe Shimbun, the newspaper. The statement and the handwriting of the composition are 100% the same, and the results came out. I stared at him enough, and this time, I suddenly burst into tears and couldn't stop. Do you admit it? Do you want to lose? This is the end. I don't want to cause more hurt to anyone. I did it. I started confessing. I asked the detective, when is the execution? The detective replied with a laugh. Death penalty? What do you mean? You're still a kid. You can't be sentenced to death, not at that age. The only salvation for me was the death penalty, a life-threatening game without a reset button. If you lose, you will be hanged. I will suffer the same as Jun, who I have taken and will die. For me, that was the only ending. Fear spreads all over my body, like a drop of detergent falling on a greasy dish. At that time, I was 1,000 times more afraid to live than to die. The police are finished with the first day of questioning and will continue again in the morning. They kept me in a cell for the night. When I got under the duvet, the tears didn't stop. My body was tense, my teeth were tied up, and tears ran down my temples like sloppy drops of water from a broken faucet. It may be hard to imagine a face like that from a photo from when I was 14, which is commonly used now on the internet. Seito was seen to be a very classic case of what's called hikikomori, which is a form of severe withdrawal from society and seeking extreme degrees of social isolation and confinement. Later on, he was charged for his crimes, but he couldn't be convicted due to the fact that he was still only 16 years old at this point. So instead, he was sent to juvenile detention and a reformatory center in Tokyo. Although his crimes were horrifying, the press and government referred to Seito as Boy A to protect his anonymity due to him being a minor. That name has now stuck to him by the press and the public. On March 11, 2004, Seito was released on probation at 21 years old. He regained full freedom in 2005, and the release was met with public criticism. His whereabouts today are heavily monitored, but magazines have made claims spotting him roaming the streets. Today, he would be 40 years old, and in 2015, he published his autobiography detailing the crimes and his remorse. No such thing as bad publicity? Well, despite controversy, his book was still able to climb up to one of Japan's bestsellers. Now, there are still people today that insist that Boy A was wrongly accused due to inconsistencies in evidence versus what he said. Some of their arguments were things like, oh, the police said that the murders were done by a left-handed person, but Boy A seems to be right-handed. The other argument was that apparently Boy A was known for having bad grades in school, and yet his letters were written very well and very elaborate for a 14-year-old. Okay, that seems to be a pretty common thing, I think, with kids, especially students. Sometimes you just apply yourself to different things outside of school. At the end of it all, Boy A confessed, and there was also a situation where the mother tried to meet him at juvenile detention where he openly confessed it to her. I personally don't see any other reason for him to confess to such heinous crimes. You could argue maybe it's just for attention, maybe it was someone else and he just wanted to take the bullet to get that kind of spotlight. But until I see stronger evidence, I'm gonna hold off on the rebuttals. Police lowered the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. A journalist covering the case said that the worst thing about the Sakakibara case is that one might have seen it coming, yet neither his family nor Japan heeded the telltale signs. Japanese children are confronted with an extremely difficult examination at their tender age of 6. Their performance effectively determines their whole future, for it decides whether they will go to a good elementary school or one of the despised state schools. If my grandmother had been alive for years, would I not have had an incident? Or would I have done the same even if she was alive? If I had the incident while my grandmother was alive, it was at least a relief she passed before that happened. No matter what I do, I think my grandmother loved me with all her heart. I can't bear the depth of love. Who's to say what really contributed to Sato's mental health and his crimes? Was it really the death of his grandmother? Or something deeper? Whatever the reason is, it could never justify the death of Jun Hase and Ayaka Yamashita, who will remain in the hearts and memories of their loved ones. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of On the Case. I'm Detective Aki, and if you guys would like to look up any other true crime cases that I have covered in Japan, feel free to go click the playlist that I'll have linked below of this video. Appreciate you guys for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more content. We'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!